You've been here before, haven't you? Standing in the mirror, looking at a woman who calls herself in love, but feels more like she's drowning. You've been here, asking yourself why your heart races when he doesn't text back, why you feel more alive in the chaos than in the quiet moments, why you keep choosing the same painful dance over and over again. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question. Have you ever loved someone who made you feel empty, but you couldn't walk away? Someone who gave you just enough to keep you hoping, but never enough to feel truly loved? If your answer is yes, then what I'm about to tell you might shatter something inside you. But sometimes we need to break the illusion to find the truth. What you've been calling love isn't love at all. It's survival. It's your nervous system responding to familiar patterns of abandonment and intermittent reinforcement, the same way it learned to respond when you were too young to understand that love shouldn't hurt. You've been living in a story where crumbs feel like a feast because you've been starving for so long that you've forgotten what nourishment actually tastes like. Carl Jung understood something profound about human nature that most people never grasp. We don't just fall in love with people. We fall in love with the parts of ourselves that we've disowned, projected, or never learned to heal. When you think you're choosing him, you're actually choosing the familiar echo of your deepest wounds. You're choosing the version of yourself that learned somewhere along the way that love comes with conditions, that affection must be earned through suffering, that your worth is measured by how much pain you can endure in the name of devotion. This is what Carl Jung called the shadow, but not in the way most people understand it. Your shadow isn't just the dark parts of yourself you don't want to acknowledge. It's also the parts of yourself you've never been allowed to be. The woman who knows she deserves consistent love. The woman who doesn't have to perform for affection. The woman who can walk away when someone treats her as optional. These parts of you have been living in the shadows, and in their absence, you've learned to love people who mirror that absence back to you. Think about it. When he gives you attention, your whole world lights up. When he withdraws, you feel like you're dying. This isn't love responding to love. This is trauma responding to abandonment into motion. It's the childhood feeling you thought you outgrown, re-emerging in the guise of adult passion. Carl Jung recognized the irony in this trap. He said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So ask yourself this: what part of your shadow are you allowing this relationship to express for you?
It's your attachment system, formed in childhood, recognizing the familiar rhythm of someone who's emotionally unavailable. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between familiar and safe. It just knows that this feeling, this terrible, wonderful, exhausting feeling, is what you've always known love to be. You've been writing yourself into the same story over and over again. The story of the woman who loves too much, who tries too hard, who believes that if she just gives enough, sacrifices enough, understands enough, she'll finally be worthy of the love she's been chasing. But here's what your unconscious mind doesn't want you to see. You're not chasing love. You're chasing the feeling of almost being loved, because that's the only version of love that feels real to you. It's like being addicted to a drug that makes you sick. The high is intoxicating, but the withdrawal is devastating. And in that space between the high and the crash, you tell yourself stories. You tell yourself, he's complicated, he's been hurt before, he just needs time, he just needs to heal, he just needs you to be patient. But what you're really saying is, I'll accept less than I deserve because I don't believe I deserve more. This is the cruelest trick your unconscious mind plays on you. It convinces you that settling for breadcrumbs is noble, that your capacity to endure emotional starvation is evidence of your love, that your willingness to stay in relationships that diminish you is proof of your loyalty. But loyalty to what? To whom? To a version of love that was never love to begin with? Jung believed that we're all walking around with invisible contracts, agreements we made with life before we were old enough to read the fine print. Your contract might have been written when you were 5 years old, watching the adults around you love each other in ways that looked more like warfare than tenderness. It might have been written when you were 12, learning that your emotions were too much, that your needs were inconvenient, that love was something you had to earn rather than something you inherently deserved. And now, as an adult, you're still operating under the terms of that contract. You're still that little girl who learned that love comes with conditions, that affection is scarce, that you have to compete for attention, that you have to be perfect to be worthy, that you have to accept whatever version of love is offered to you because something is better than nothing.
Better than nothing. But here's what that little girl didn't know, what you're only beginning to understand now. That contract was never valid. It was written by people who didn't know how to love themselves, signed by a child who didn't know she had the right to negotiate better terms. You've been living your entire adult life bound by an agreement that was never in your best interest, that was never meant to serve your highest good, that was never meant to help you flourish. The man you think you love isn't really the man you love. He's the projection of your unhealed wounds, the mirror of your unconscious beliefs about what you deserve, the embodiment of every story you've ever told yourself about love being hard, about good women suffering in silence, about the nobility of enduring pain for the sake of connection. You've fallen in love with your own trauma, and you've dressed it up in his face, his voice, his promises, his potential. This is why you can't leave, even when every rational part of your mind knows you should. This is why you feel more bonded to him after he hurts you than after he treats you well. This is why the calm moments feel boring and the chaotic moments feel like home. You're not addicted to him. You're addicted to the familiar pattern of abandonment and reunion, rejection and acceptance, pain and relief that your nervous system learned to associate with love. You're living in a story where the princess falls in love with the dragon, where the prisoner falls in love with the cage, where the woman falls in love with her own chains and calls them jewelry. But stories can be rewritten. Contracts can be dissolved. Patterns can be broken. The woman who has been sleepwalking through her own life can wake up. The question isn't whether you love him. The question is, do you love yourself enough to stop calling trauma love? Do you love yourself enough to stop accepting crumbs and calling them a feast? Do you love yourself enough to walk away from the familiar pain toward the unfamiliar possibility of genuine love? Because what you've been calling love isn't love. It's a trauma bond. It's your wounded inner child trying to heal herself by recreating the same dynamics that wounded her in the first place. It's your unconscious mind trying to solve an old problem with the same tools that created the problem. It's your heart trying to find home in the very place that taught it to feel homeless. But you're not that little girl anymore. You're not bound by contracts you never truly agreed to. You're not required to love people who make you feel small, who make you question your worth, who make you feel like you're too much and not enough at the same time. You're not required to stay in relationships that require you to abandon yourself in order to keep them. The woman staring back at you in the mirror deserves better than survival disguised as love. She deserves better than chaos disguised as passion. She deserves better than trauma disguised as destiny. And the first step toward that better love is recognizing that what you've been calling love has been something else entirely. Now that you're beginning to see through the illusion, let me show you exactly what trauma bonding looks like. These aren't just signs, they're mirrors. Look into each one and see if you recognize the woman staring back at you. Don't judge her. Don't shame her. Just see her clearly, perhaps for the first time. The first sign is that you confuse chaos with passion. When things are calm between you, when he's being kind and consistent, you feel anxious. You feel bored. You feel like something is missing, like the relationship is losing its spark. But when he's distant, when he's unpredictable,
When he's making you question where you stand, suddenly you feel alive again. Your heart races, your mind spins, and you tell yourself this intensity is proof of how much you love each other. This is your nervous system mistaking familiar dysfunction for authentic connection. You've been conditioned to associate love with uncertainty, with having to fight for attention, with never quite knowing where you stand. Peace feels foreign to you because your attachment system was formed in chaos. You've learned to interpret calm as the absence of love rather than the presence of safety. Think of it like this. Imagine someone who grew up in a house where the only time the family came together was during crisis. As an adult, they might unconsciously create crisis in their own relationships because that's the only way they know how to feel connected. You're not choosing chaos because you're dramatic. You're choosing chaos because it's the only version of love that feels real to your wounded nervous system. The second sign is that you fear leaving more than staying, even when staying hurts. You've calculated the pain of being with him against the pain of being without him, and somehow the familiar agony of staying feels safer.
The unknown territory of leaving. You're not loyal to love, you're loyal to pain. You're not staying because the relationship is good, you're staying because leaving feels like death. This is what Jung called the terrible mother archetype, playing out in your psyche. The terrible mother is the part of you that would rather keep you in familiar suffering than risk the uncertainty of growth. She whispers that you're nothing without him, that you'll never find anyone else, that this is the best you can do. She keeps you small and scared, because small and scared feels safer than expansive and unknown. You've become like a prisoner who's been in jail so long that the thought of freedom terrifies her more than the bars. The cell has become home, the chains have become jewelry, and the guard has become the person you call your beloved. You're not staying because you're weak. You're staying because your survival instincts are confused, mistaking captivity for safety. The third sign is that you constantly feel like the problem. He never explicitly says it, but somehow you always end up apologizing. When he's distant, you assume you did something wrong. When he's angry, you search your memory for what you might have done to upset him. When the relationship isn't working, you immediately start thinking about how you need to change, how you need to be better, how you need to be less demanding or more understanding. This is the voice of your inner child who learned that love was conditional, that she had to be perfect to be worthy, that her needs were too much and her emotions were inconvenient. You've internalized the message that if someone doesn't love you the way you need to be loved, it must be because you're not lovable enough. You've become a detective of your own flaws, constantly searching for evidence of why you don't deserve better treatment. It's like living with a broken mirror that only shows you your imperfections. Every time you look at the relationship, you see what's wrong with you rather than what's wrong with the dynamic. You've become so skilled at taking responsibility for other people's behavior that you've forgotten how to hold them accountable for their choices. The fourth sign is that you feel addicted to his presence and sick in his absence. When he's with you, especially when he's being loving and attentive, you feel like you can breathe again. But when he's gone, when he's distant, when he's pulling away, you feel like you're
Suffocating. You check your phone obsessively, replay conversations in your mind, and feel physically ill with anxiety and longing. This isn't love. This is withdrawal. You've become addicted to the neurochemical cocktail that intermittent reinforcement creates. When someone gives you attention inconsistently, your brain releases dopamine in the same pattern as a slot machine. You're not craving him, you're craving the next hit of validation, the next moment of relief from the anxiety his absence creates. True love creates a sense of security and wholeness. It doesn't make you feel like you're dying when the other person isn't around. It doesn't make you feel like you need another person to feel complete. What you're experiencing is the push and pull of an addiction, the high-end crash of a drug that's slowly killing you while making you feel temporarily alive. The fifth sign is that you stay because of what he could become, not who he is. You're in love with his potential, with the version of him that shows up occasionally, with the man he promises to be when he's trying to keep you from leaving. You've created an elaborate fantasy of who he could be if only he healed his wounds, if only he learned to communicate better, if only he realized how much you love him. But you're not in a relationship with his potential. You're in a relationship with who he is right now, today, in this moment. And who he is right now is someone who makes you feel uncertain, unworthy, and unloved more often than he makes you feel cherished. You're investing in a future that may never come while sacrificing a present that's slipping away from you. It's like buying a house based on what it could look like after renovation, but the renovation never happens. You keep living in the construction zone, surrounded by broken walls and unfinished dreams, telling yourself that someday it will be beautiful. But someday isn't a relationship status. Someday isn't a commitment. Someday is a story you tell yourself to avoid facing the reality of today. The sixth sign is that you feel more bonded after being hurt. This is perhaps the most insidious aspect of trauma bonding. When he hurts you and then shows you kindness, when he creates the wound and then offers to heal it, you feel more connected to him than ever. The relief from pain feels like love. The end of suffering feels like salvation. You mistake the absence of pain for the presence of love. This is your nervous system
responding to the cycle of abuse and rescue that trauma bonds create. When someone hurts you and then comforts you, your brain creates a powerful association between that person and relief from pain. You begin to see them as both the source of your suffering and the solution to it. You become bonded to your captor, grateful to your jailer, in love with your tormentor. It's like Stockholm Syndrome of the heart. You've learned to love the person who holds the keys to your emotional prison, not realizing that they're also the one who locked you up in the first place. The moments of tenderness after the moments of cruelty feel so precious because they're so rare, so unexpected, so desperately needed. The seventh and final sign is that you've lost your voice, your glow, your joy. You're still physically present in your life, but you've disappeared from your own experience. You've become a ghost of who you used to be, a shadow of your former self, a woman who has traded her authenticity for the illusion of love. You don't laugh the way you used to. You don't dream the way you used to. You don't shine the way you used to. This is what happens when you spend all your energy trying to be who someone else needs you to be, instead of who you actually are. You've contorted yourself into shapes that don't fit your soul, spoken words that don't match your truth, lived a life that doesn't reflect your values. You've become a stranger to yourself in the name of love, but what you've really become is a prisoner of your own making. Look at recent photos of yourself. Look at how you smile now compared to how you smiled before you met him. Look at the light in your eyes, the energy in your posture, the joy in your expression. If you can barely recognize the woman in those earlier photos, if she seems like a different person entirely, then you're looking at the cost of mistaking trauma for love. These 7 signs aren't character flaws. They're symptoms. They're evidence of a nervous system that learned to associate love with danger, connection with chaos, intimacy with uncertainty. They're proof that you've been trying to heal old wounds with new versions of the same pain. They're signs that you've been living in a story that was never meant to have a happy ending, because it was never really a love story at all. If you've seen yourself in these mirrors, if you've recognized the woman staring back at you, don't despair. Recognition is the first step toward liberation. Awareness is the beginning of choice.
Seeing clearly is the foundation of freedom. You're not broken. You're just bound by patterns that no longer serve you. And patterns can be changed. The woman who has been reading these words, who has been seeing herself in these mirrors, who has been recognizing the patterns that have kept her trapped, is not the same woman who began this journey. Something has shifted. Something has awakened. Something has begun to break free from the chains she didn't even know she was wearing. What you've been calling love was never love. It was a trauma bond, a neurochemical addiction, a repetition compulsion designed to keep you stuck in familiar patterns of pain. But here's what your wounded heart needs to understand. Recognizing this isn't a failure. It's not evidence that you're broken or weak or doomed to repeat the same mistakes forever. It's evidence that you're ready to heal, ready to grow, ready to step into a version of love that actually serves your highest good. Carl Jung had a word for this process: individualization. It's the journey of becoming who you actually are, rather than who you think you need to be to earn love. It's the process of separating your identity from your relationships, your worth from your ability to keep someone else happy, your value from your capacity to endure pain in the name of devotion. Individualization means learning to love yourself so completely that you no longer need someone else to complete you. It means developing such a strong sense of your own worth that you can't be convinced to accept less than you deserve. It's healing the wounds that made you believe love was supposed to hurt, that good women suffer in silence, that your needs were too much and your emotions were inconvenient. The trauma bond you've been living in isn't really about him. It's about the little girl inside you who never learned that she was worthy of consistent love, who never experienced what it felt like to be cherished without having to earn it, who never knew that relationships could be safe havens rather than battlefields. You haven't been trying to love him. You've been trying to love that little girl through him. You've been trying to give her what she never received by accepting whatever scraps of affection he was willing to offer. But here's what that little girl needs you to understand. She can't be healed by someone else's love. She can only be healed by yours. She can't be saved by a man
Who makes her feel small. She can only be saved by a woman who makes her feel safe. She can't find home in someone else's heart. She can only find home in your willingness to create safety within yourself. This is the journey from trauma bonding to authentic love. It's not about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person. It's not about fixing your relationships. It's about healing your relationship with yourself. It's not about learning to love better. It's about learning to love yourself first, so completely and so unconditionally that you become incapable of accepting anything less than genuine love from others. The first step in this journey is naming what has been happening to you. Stop calling it love. Stop romanticizing the pain. Stop making excuses for behavior that makes you feel small. Call it what it is: a trauma bond, a pattern, a repetition of old wounds, a familiar dance that you've been dancing for so long that you forgot there were other songs to dance to. The second step is understanding that this pattern didn't begin with him. It began long before you met him, in the earliest relationships of your life, in the first experiences that taught you what love looked like. You've been recreating those early dynamics over and over again, hoping for a different outcome, hoping that this time, if you love hard enough, sacrifice enough, endure enough, you'll finally get the love you've been searching for. But the love you've been searching for can't be found in someone else. It can only be found in your willingness to give yourself what you've been trying to get from others. It can only be found in your decision to stop abandoning yourself in the name of love, to stop betraying your own needs for the sake of keeping someone else comfortable, to stop accepting crumbs and calling them a feast. The third step is making a different choice, not just once, but every day, in every moment when you feel the pull of the old pattern, when you want to text him after he's been distant, when you want to apologize for something that isn't your fault, when you want to make excuses for behavior that makes you feel bad about yourself, when you want to stay because leaving feels scary. This is where your real power lies, in the space between the trigger
and the response, between the old pattern and the new choice, between who you've been and who you're becoming. This is where transformation happens, not in grand gestures or dramatic moments,
but in the quiet decision to choose yourself over and over again, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's unfamiliar, even when it's scary. The fourth step is learning to tolerate the discomfort of authentic love. When you've been living on emotional junk food for so long, real nourishment can feel strange at first. When you've been addicted to chaos, peace can feel boring. When you've been accustomed to earning love through suffering, unconditional love can feel suspicious. Your nervous system will try to convince you that something is wrong, that you need to create drama, that you need to find problems where none exist. But this is just your old programming trying to keep you safe in familiar territory. It's your wounded inner child trying to recreate the only version of love she knows. It's your trauma bond trying to reassert itself, trying to convince you that the old pain was better than the new peace. Don't listen to it. Don't let it pull you back into patterns that no longer serve you. The fifth step is surrounding yourself with people who reflect your worth back to you. People who don't make you question your value, who don't require you to perform for their affection, who don't make you feel like you're too much or not enough. People who celebrate your growth rather than trying to keep you small, who support your healing rather than trying to keep you wounded, who love you for who you are rather than who you pretend to be. This might mean letting go of relationships that were built on your willingness to accept less than you deserve. It might mean disappointing people who were comfortable with your dysfunction. It might mean being alone for a while as you learn to be comfortable with yourself. But loneliness is not the same as aloneness. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Aloneness is the presence of yourself. The sixth step is learning to trust your own inner wisdom. You've spent so long doubting yourself, second-guessing your instinct, and looking to others for validation that you've forgotten how to trust your own voice. But that voice is still there, underneath all the noise and confusion. It's the voice that has been trying to tell you that something was wrong, that you deserved better, that this wasn't really love. Start listening to that voice. Start trusting your gut feelings, your intuitive knowing, your body's wisdom. When someone makes you feel bad about yourself, trust that feeling. When someone's words don't match
their actions, trust that observation. When someone asks you to accept less than you deserve, trust your resistance. Your inner wisdom knows the difference between love and trauma bonding, even when your mind is confused. The seventh and final step is choosing to write a new story. Not just about relationships, but about yourself. A story where you're the hero of your own life, rather than the victim of someone else's inability to love you well. A story where you're whole and complete on your own. Where you choose relationships that add to your life, rather than subtract from it. Where you love from a place of fullness rather than emptiness. This new story isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about becoming the person you needed when you were younger. It's about healing the wounds that made you believe you had to earn love, that made you think your needs were too much, that made you settle for crumbs when you deserved the whole feast. It's about becoming so comfortable with yourself that you can't be convinced to abandon yourself for anyone else. The woman who called trauma bonding love is not the same woman who will walk away from this experience. She has been transformed by her willingness to see clearly, to face the truth, to choose herself over familiar pain. She has learned that love isn't supposed to hurt, that good relationships don't require her to lose herself, that she deserves to be cherished rather than tolerated. This woman knows that she is worthy of love that makes her feel safe, seen, and celebrated. She knows that she deserves relationships that bring out the best in her rather than requiring her to hide her light. She knows that true love doesn't ask her to choose between herself and the relationship. It asks her to bring all of herself to the relationship. The butterfly doesn't mourn the caterpillar she used to be. She doesn't apologize for outgrowing the cocoon that once kept her safe. She doesn't feel guilty for spreading her wings and flying toward the light. She simply embraces her transformation and trusts that she was always meant to be free. You were always meant to be free. Free from trauma bonds disguised as love. Free from patterns that keep you small. Free from the belief that you have to earn what you inherently deserve. Free to love and be loved in ways that honor your worth, celebrate your growth, and support your highest good. The woman who has been reading these words is ready to fly. She's ready to leave
the cocoon of familiar pain and step into the light of authentic love. She's ready to stop calling trauma love and start calling love by its true name, freedom.